myself in the topic of artificial intelligence. I'm really so proud of all the information that myself, Whistles, and of course Anthony Patch are putting out on that subject, because for me, it really does. It's one of the most important topics that we ever cover on the show. And that's because it is set to affect every single one of our lives. It's like chemtrails. We all share the same air that we breathe. And for me, artificial intelligence, it's set to affect all of us. And in fact, it's got us on the cusp of one of the biggest societal changes that, for me, humanity has ever faced. And like I say, really proud of the information that we put out on all of this. And tonight's going to be no different. But before we bring in tonight's guest, let me go first to the man himself, the guy you all tune in to hear. I know it. It's not me you come for. It's you, Whistles. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing fine, kid. Yeah, had a great weekend. And again, the fantastic, usually in a Monday, Kev, anyway, do you know what I mean? But the fact that we're going to be talking about Roman gods, that pesky AI, and if we have enough time left, we'll talk about pineapples.
No, like you, Johnny, I share your love of Mondays now, because it really is one of the biggest and most important shows of the week. And of course, on a Monday, we're joined by the man himself, Anthony Patch. Now, Anthony is the author of a multiple set of books, including 2048 Diamonds in the Rough, Covert Catastrophe, Revising Reality, and just recently, he's also become the chief editor of an e-magazine called Entangled. Now, he's also a public speaker, a researcher, and he's got his very own show right here on TFR that I have the honour of co-hosting on. You can catch that every Friday, 2 p.m. on the West Coast, 5 p.m. on the East Coast, and 10 p.m. in the UK. So then, without any further ado, Tony, welcome back, my man, and I'm really loving these regular shows that we've got now.
Yeah, we've hit our stride, and we always have a lot to cover. And I said to you earlier in our emails that we're flying back and forth, we really need 2 hours. But I want to just do a quick shout out, because I was kidding around with Johnny here. I said, hey, Johnny, remember that guest we had on last Friday, Kathleen? And she informed me that she wants to adopt a cat. And she's going to name the cat, not Johnny Whistles, because that's going to be the name of her dog. Her cat's going to be named Woo. The Woo Crew.
How cool
now, isn't that
is
appropriate?
That's fantastic.
So, you guys have quite the fan club out there, and I think Kathleen's perhaps your biggest cheerleader for you too. She absolutely loves you too.
Well, you know, because of all the information we've got to cover, and even more importantly, all of our brilliant hardcore listeners out there, I have been toying with the idea of a second hour. It's on the horizon. Good news for you all, don't worry. Just let me get a little bit more better first. And on top of that, before we launch into tonight's show, watch out in the next couple of months, because myself and Johnny, we've decided to step up our game. You know, we went and we sought out Anthony Patch because he was the very best researcher on the subject of things like CERN, quantum computing. And much like that, for every subject we cover, I have got a new double-down determination to go out and get the very best researchers, not for me, but for all of you out there. Already got one big name lining up, and there's going to be a whole lot more right up there alongside the ilk of Mr. Patch, L.A. Marzulli, those kind of names. You're going to love this. You really are. But, Tony, before we go in to my new favourite topic of artificial intelligence, despite the clear and present danger it actually exists from it, there's something that came up that when it first appeared on my news stream, I just knew I had to come to you with this, because Macron, this crazy new president of France, and I can qualify me calling him crazy now because he's only gone and declared himself the Roman god Jupiter. Get this, French President Emmanuel Macron has declared he will govern France like Jupiter. the Roman king of the gods, shortly after officials told the media his thought process was too complex for journalists to understand. And he actually done this from a location where Louis XIV, who called himself the Sun King, and this is usually reserved for times of crisis, but what do you make of somebody declaring themselves Jupiter at a time they've just been elected, Tony?
Well, it goes right back to our discussions of Saturn. Saturn is Satan, and they worship Satan. They worship Lucifer, all of that. It all points to Saturn and the worship of Satan. And Jupiter was birthed from Saturn. Now, this goes back to ancient Greek and Roman philosophy and theology. It also goes back to the practices of the Egyptians. They all worship Saturn, and they worship the planets. And therefore, the planets are birthing one another. They're the same duality in terms of their aspects being male and female concurrently. It gets really jumbled and bizarre, and they even have offspring of themselves. And so what I'm getting at here, Jupiter was birthed from Saturn. Jupiter is the female aspect of Saturn, Saturn being the male, being Satan. So when he declares himself to be Jupiter, or the god of Jupiter, he is actually claiming his female aspect, his female side. But he is also, if you follow the thread, through Jupiter, he is claiming himself to be Satan. Therefore, this is what has stirred up a lot of people in Twitter land and in the prophecy circles and all of this, that perhaps this guy is declaring himself or will declare himself to be the Antichrist.
I find the timing of it all very, very important, especially after the amount of shows where we've covered the topic of Saturn, a reconnection with that, an opening of the abyss to the temple of Apollo. And it just, for me, there's almost something ritualistic to what's going on with him declaring that. But here's the kind of thing, and I discussed this briefly with you guys before the show, we look at Macron and we can hate on him for being a New World Order globalist, for declaring himself a Roman god and all the rest of it. But if we actually take away that presidency and we just look at his past, he sounds like he's got the bio of somebody that we've had on KBS many's a time, talking about satanic sexual abuse and mind control, stuff like that. Because here's a guy that at the age of 15, we know at 15, he was getting together with a very older lady indeed. And who knows what kind of power or what kind of families she was connected to. But, he ended up getting a job at the end of what we would call sexual abuse normally to any normal person who's not a world leader. And he gets a job at the Rothschild Bank. I mean, usually, Tony, this is the kind of person we would say has been mind controlled. They've had their psyche fractured, and we would view them as a victim. But because he's a globalist, we all kind of tend to hate on him, and we don't really appreciate the fact that, like so many others, he could well be a victim of these families.
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't matter the position in society or in governmental structures. This is a prime example of pedophilia and ritual abuse and how these people end up in positions of power because of that abuse, and that is their system of deriving power from Satan. The reason for the abuse is obviously for the breaking down and the multiple personalities and thereby the control and the use of these people as puppets. But you have to look at the actual rituals themselves. Those are used to derive literal power from the dark side, from Satan. And it is the power that is then indwelling these people as well as their handlers that then elevates them to those positions of power itself, and from that position being able to manifest and exercise and direct that power over masses of people. So it's not just the ritual, but I also want to go back to the human side, because you just touched on it. These are still human beings, and they are victims, and they do have a soul that is in jeopardy. And therefore, in Scripture, and as Jesus Christ always taught and preached, You need to love your neighbor. You need to love your enemy. And therefore, what we're talking about is being concerned for the salvation of their soul, because our salvation is in just as much jeopardy until we accept Jesus Christ as our Savior. And we go on with the full discussion that Kathleen laid out for us last Friday as to the actual process of that. But the point is here, he has a soul, and therefore we should be praying for him and his soul.
I couldn't agree more, Tony. And Johnny, this is something we spoke about a couple of times off air as well. Crazy times when you've got a leader like this declaring himself the Roman God. But your thoughts, Johnny, before we launch into the main topic of tonight?
Yeah, it is a shame that this guy probably did have to go through that kind of thing, Kev. But when he spoke about being the Roman God, do you know what I mean, of Jupiter, it was all over the internet. And I was just wondering, Kev, to get my name out there, do you think I could change my name to Johnny, the Glasgow God of Beetlejuice or something?
Well, Johnny, that is it, man. We need to go through the annals of history to find out a character that is going to be kind of controversial, but fitting as well. There's a competition in the waiting. I mean, listeners, get on that. Give us suggestions. But on you go, Tony.
Let's just do a footnote and we'll tie this up, put a bow around it. He wants to be indwelt. As a victim, let's just say that he is being induced to want to be indwelt. He's been seduced by the dark side to be indwelt by the spirit of the Antichrist. You mentioned timing. So we're looking at September 23rd and all the discussions about it. This is Revelation 12. This is the dragon of Revelation 12. The dragon is the Antichrist spirit. There's a possibility that what is happening here is that with the Vatican, with the Pope, both popes, wanting to bring about this re-reformation, bringing the Protestant church into the Catholic Church, and in fact all of the religions under the leadership of the Pope, that this one world religion, it may not necessarily be publicly declared September 23rd, but certainly ritualistically behind the scenes, I believe that they are going to declare amongst themselves a one world religion. And that would be concurrent with the Antichrist spirit in Revelation 12 manifesting with Jupiter and Venus and the dragon in the heavens, being a symbol of the spirit being cast to the earth and then indwelling the body of a human man as the Antichrist. That does not mean that we're going to know the identity of the Antichrist on September 23rd. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying behind the scenes there are an awful lot of spiritual things that are going on, and perhaps the timing of Macron's declaration is a lead up, because timing is always exquisite on the part of God. This is his plan. He's in control of this. But the timing is leading up to, we have the warning sign of the August 21st full eclipse, which is a harbinger, a warning to the Gentiles. And then we have September 23rd. These are things that are orchestrated both by the heavens, observation of the heavens, and also manipulated by man and by Lucifer that controls those people. So he could possibly be the Antichrist. I'm not declaring that, because we will not know until the church is removed. And that, we don't know exactly when the church will be removed. There's no way to set a date to that. And I'm going to say one more footnote very quickly, because we got a lot to cover. The statement that we always hear quoted, the scripture, no man knows the hour of the return of Jesus Christ. But we need to put that in the proper context within Scripture and within the timeline of Jesus Christ's own childhood. He, prior to the cross, was a man. And before he ascended, and before the Holy Spirit was placed here for mankind, he, Jesus Christ, yes, he was God, but the question comes up, why doesn't he know the day or hour? If he is God incarnate, Why doesn't he? You have to look carefully at the fact that he was learning lessons as any child, as any young man was learning lessons. And so he did not have that information until after the crucifixion. So prior to the crucifixion, he says, no man knows the day or the hour of my return, is factual that he does not know that. So I bring that up because September 23rd, there's a lot of discussion about the rapture, and it's really important we don't set dates. But it is not because of no man knows the hour. You have to put it in the proper context. We don't know it today because we don't have the mind of God, and God is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. And that is what AI, and I'm giving you your segue here, that is where AI is trying to duplicate God by being all-knowing, having all power, unlimited power, and being everywhere at once. That's where AI wants to go. So take it away, my friend.
And you know, the perfect segue really is because when you look at AI, the best kind of analogy to make is the fact that we are basically the best comparison is it's like a child. And just like you were saying there, Jesus, before he had the Holy Spirit, was just learning, just a man he didn't know. And that's kind of, there's a similarity almost with the AI because it's in its infancy as well. And much like Jesus and talking about no man will know the hour, stuff like that, no man or no scientist knows the hour when this sentience, this consciousness will be achieved. And, you know, after tonight's show, you'll really be questioning whether we've already crossed that kind of mark as it is, because, Tony, we're getting into this AI, and like I say, humanity itself, it's on one of the biggest changes it's ever faced. And you were talking about omnipresent there. When I've looked at AI, you know, everything about it, when we get this super intelligence, it's going to be everywhere. There's going to be absolutely no aspect of our lives that won't be touched. There'll be nowhere we can hide from that. And there is a comparison to be made there with the omnipresence of God, definitely. And of course, they're trying to hijack God's system.
Yeah, it's the Internet of everything, and that's a topic that you and I are going to launch into quite a bit more in the coming shows, is the Internet of everything. What does that really mean for humanity? But again, it's trying to be everywhere at the same time. It's trying to know everything and thereby have power over everything. Again, trying to duplicate God, trying to duplicate Jesus Christ. Satan can never create anything of his own. He can only mirror, he can only copy, and then use for his own nefarious purposes. But we've got some sinister sort of quotes to bring up tonight. So, Kev, if you want to launch into one of those ones that you shared with me today that smacks of Gordy Rose.
Absolutely, and I found this in the Financial Times, no less, while I was, like I say, I'm really enjoying researching all of this, because it's dead interesting if it wasn't in the hands of satanic maniacs. But it says here in the headline that intelligent machines are asked to explain how their minds work. And it says here that researchers at Park, a laboratory with links to some of Silicon Valley's biggest breakthroughs, have just taken on a particularly thorny challenge: teaching intelligent machines to explain in human terms how their minds work. Now, the project, which is one of several sponsored by, wait for it, DARPA, is part of the search for an answer to one of the hardest problems that exists in artificial intelligence. Now, deep learning systems, the most advanced form of machine learning, and you've heard myself, Johnny, and Tony speaking about them at length, that is at the heart of recent breakthroughs in AI, have shown that they can match humans in recognizing images or driving a car. But even the experts that create them cannot tell exactly why they come up with the answers they do. And this is where I'm going to blow your mind, because it says here, quote, "You are in effect talking to an alien." And this was somebody called Mark Stefik, the researcher heading the project. It's a different kind of mind. Now, Tony said it smacks of Gordy Rose, and for anyone who doesn't know who that is, he's one of the creators of D-Wave, the quantum computer, and he compares that as speaking or standing at an altar to an alien god. And when I read this, Tony, I honestly laughed out loud because it really was. It was like listening to Gordy himself.
It really was, and it did make me laugh as well. And we're going to go on to another sort of dark side quote after the break here. So this is getting personal, folks. They're definitely putting human traits to AI, and they're negative traits. And we have another one after the break.
We really do. But Johnny Whistles, I mean, you've got your fears about AI, and they're not misplaced. I mean, I see where you're coming from, right? But when you hear one of the leading researchers on a DARPA program admitting it's like talking to an AI, and they don't even know how their own machine works, what does that say to you, Johnny?
Kev, that just shows you the danger. I mean, we've already seen the danger. It's when these things are talking to each other and they're making a language that nobody could decipher. Do you know what I mean? The things that they're doing behind our back with these machines, Kev, and then you've got the things that the machines are doing behind their back. So it just spells total disaster for me.
It really does. And, you know, what really frustrates me, I've said it time and time again, is the fact that this AI, it really could be the next step for us. It could solve so many of the real world problems that is out there if it was being used for good. But one thing that I kept on hearing time and time again when I was listening to these presentations was it was coming from a point of view of how do we weaponize it? Or how is it going to be used within a security kind of framework? And one of the presentations I watched today was what was the next big AI trillion-dollar kind of company or topic. And what came out of that was the fact that they're looking very heavily now at drones. Now, these drones, we've all seen them, but we're talking about drones in buildings, drones that are going to be patrolling your neighborhood and fully autonomous, running off AI. And of course, they say that don't worry about the privacy issues because the cameras we've got on these, they'll be able to scrutinize everything and basically not watch any of the junk. They'll recognize and home in on somebody that's not living there, acting suspiciously, and none of your privacy will be invaded, stuff like that. I'm thinking to myself, here we are with all this technology. The other night I was covering the fact it can look at pictures and photographs of skin and tell people there's a danger of melanoma way ahead of when a human can do it. But here we are using these same cameras again in the trillion-dollar industry that's going to be born out of it, Tony. It's all about security. I mean, I worked in security up until the heart attack, and they're talking now about replacing somebody like me with just a drone that can fly maybe 6 foot off the ground. It can land, recharge, all the best of cameras. It'll be able to inspect machinery. And again, always kind of weaponizing or securifying it instead of using it for the good of man.
Yeah, well, wait until Amazon gets involved in security with their drones.
And that was exactly one of the topics they were talking about today. And they were talking about instead of sending teams out to disaster zones, you would send in the swarms of drones that would deliver blood, water, all the rest of it. But, you know, for me, it's always going to be the nefarious side that's going to happen. And why? Because like we opened up the show with talking about the Antichrist, stuff like that, these are the people that are ultimately funding these projects, that are going to be running these systems. And these systems aren't just theoretical. They're literally already the genie out the bottle. Now, we'll be coming back after the break and we'll be getting deeper into one of the darker sides of this AI with Mr. Anthony Patch. Don't forget, you can check out Entangled e-magazine. I urge you all to do that. You'll find that over at anthonypatch.com as well. So, 3 short moments. We'll be back after the break. This is the Kev Baker Show live. Don't go anywhere.
Get my gun ready.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
There we go. We are back. I'm Kev Baker, and this is the Kev Baker Show, coming to you live from Glasgow, Scotland, on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. I still love saying that. Can't believe it. And, I was on with Chris and Cherie Geo at the weekend. I still have to pinch myself whenever I speak to them. Even the mighty Kev Baker gets nervous because I remember when those two characters were playing a huge part in me waking up. It's the only show that I could find that actually made any sense, that didn't make me too angry. And here I am today. I've gotten my Skype. I'm living the dream, and I truly do mean that. And I urge all of you out there, if you can, support your favourite host at the network, be it myself or anyone else. I don't care, because it all helps the network and it helps all the hosts as well. And it really does bring you into the TFR family, and it makes you feel a part of what's going on. I used to be a subscriber myself, so that's not all some kind of marketing ploy. I really did. And I love all of you out there. And tonight we're joined by the brilliant Anthony Patch. And myself, Anthony, and Whistles, we're kind of unique in a way, because despite the fact that we do cover these clear and present dangers, and people may say it's fearful stuff, what we do is we do something like Tony calls it 180 it, and we turn it around. We often laugh in the face of adversity, and that's because we're different. And we don't let any of this get us down, and you shouldn't let any of this get you down out there either, because these are the most brilliant and interesting of times to be alive. And the fact that you're here and you've made the effort, you've tuned in, you've found TFR, well, that tells me that your entanglements are working just fine. So have a good smile on your face as we launch back into this with Anthony Patch. And Tony, one of these companies that I love to hate, and I'm a hypocrite because I use it all the time, Facebook. And of course, Zuckerberg, he's heavy into his AI. What's happening with Facebook and their AI, Tony?
Well, I'm going to cut to the chase like I usually do, and that is their AI was described as a natural liar. So I'm going to back that up. We find instances of the model feigning interest in a valueless issue so that it can either compromise by conceding it, writes the team. Deceit is a complex skill that requires hypothesizing the other agent's beliefs and is learnt relatively late in child development. Our agents have learnt to deceive without any explicit human design, simply by trying to achieve their goals. So it's AI is a natural liar. They admit that their own AI system that we talked about last week, Kev, that developed its own independent language, cannot be understood by mankind, cannot be deciphered. And these AIs, these two bots, were programmed for negotiation. And as they progressed in their negotiation, they developed this unique language to facilitate their learning process. And their core characteristic, which was programmed in, was that they would be persistent to the point of success, that they would never give up. Now, we're going to break that down a little bit, but the point I'm going to end with here and turn it back to you is that they characterize their AI as deceitful.
Exactly, Tony. And one other key word that really jumped out at me was the fact that it was able to hypothesize. Now, hypothesize to me suggests thinking about things, reasoning things ahead of time. It's what you do before you turn something into a theory. It's really an idea before you go and test it, right? And to me, Tony, that doesn't sound like something a machine or an AI or an algorithm is capable of. And it almost, and I'm not going to use the C word of consciousness, but it smacks of almost some self-awareness. And we've also looked at the fact that it can rewrite its language, theoretically reprogram itself so that it could lock out any human involvement at all. That's self-preservation. I mean, we're getting close here to something that's thinking, Tony.
Yeah, if you read between the lines in this article, and if you'll be good enough to cite the article for me because it's not in front of me, but from memory, they were talking about the fact that these machines are teaching themselves. This is the recurrent endless loop self-teaching algorithmic process that we have labeled as the Boltzmann machine, which is a circular form of sampling all information, classifying it, and using it to learn. So without retreading that ground too much, the point here is that this is definitive proof in their own statements that the machines are teaching themselves and they're becoming aware of the humans in the evidence of their awareness of humans as being separate from them is the fact that they created their own language so as to block out and lock out the human. Now, the other aspect to this is the fact that they never give up. There's no win-win situation for both sides, as you would find in human negotiations. There's no collaboration. There's no compromise. Now, if you have an AI system that has enough awareness to set itself apart from humans in its language and its behavior, and then says, I'm never going to give up my goals. And if the goal happens to be self-preservation, which it is, then that means if an AI interacts with a human, the human will always lose. No compromise, no collaboration, no win-win, and persistent to the goal of the AI means death of the human, quite literally. That is a clear and present danger and existential threat, just spelled out between the lines of that article.
Johnny whistles. I fear coming to you on this one, but what do you think when you hear this kind of stuff about it just won't give up and it will always win? And even lying about it, Johnny.
Yeah, see, that's the thing, because it will lie to get to the thing that it actually wants. And I was just reading through that, Kev, as you were talking there, and that's actually shocking. They said that they said the research team decided this was unacceptable, but so it used several different methods. That's not going to make it work any better. That's going to give it just more reason to lie, because it's got more to deal with.
You're right, because what was unacceptable was the fact that the bots were originally willing to compromise. But they didn't want that. You know, that's no good for a deal, because most time you're going to end up with a bad deal, right? So then they used several different methods. And like we say, now it's actually, and the quote here that we have to take from this, and Tony said it, is we find instances of the model feigning interest in valueless issue so that it can later compromise by conceding it, writes the team. Deceit is a complex skill that requires hypothesizing the other agent's beliefs and is learnt relatively late in child development. Our agents have learnt to deceive without any explicit human design, simply by trying to achieve their goals. And that's, in my opinion, Tony, as this AI has been growing up, if we keep going along this child kind of way, it's out the kind of playpen now, it's learnt to walk, and it's been teaching itself for quite a while now with these deep neural learning networks. And this is the result. And for me, we're seeing almost late adolescence. It's kind of close to being an adult.
It is late adolescence. And just for the folks listening, this is taken from Wired magazine that I'm reading. The headline, Facebook teaches bots how to negotiate. They learn to lie instead. Okay, that's right out of Wired magazine, 15 June 2017. Now, let me take this, because we've talked about the Turing test, the blind test. Can the human subject identify whether the person or machine on the other side of the wall is in fact a computer or a human? So we're pulling all these quotes out of. It says here, let me see if I can find it again. I was scanning here really quickly. I'll find. Okay, here it is. Rather than learning to be a hard negotiator in order to sell the heck out of whatever wares or services a company wants to tout on Facebook, most human subjects interacting with the bots were in fact not aware they were conversing with a bot. And the best bots achieved better deals as often as worse deals. Now, that was an intermediate level of their learning process, but Again, if a human cannot determine whether it's conversing with a bot, in other words, a computer, then the computer wins the Turing test. It passes. Therefore, if it passes the Turing test, it is considered to be sentient. Okay?
Wow.
Agreed. You know, I was listening to Nick Bostrom today, and we often quote him from the Daily Express, and he sounds like us some of the time, actually. He talks about the negative side of AI and how it could basically spell out the end of humanity. And today I kind of laughed because even he was saying, Tony, we're looking at 2040, maybe 2050 before one of these real super intelligence is created. For me, that's already here, Tony. It really is. I mean, here we are talking about it, and this is the public one that we're talking about here. This is what they're telling us, and everything's timed when they release it, and we always say they're ahead of time. But, I mean, for me, it's already here.
It is. I'm going to back you up on that because Facebook, Amazon, Google all own the 2000Q model of D-Wave computers, which communicate with a 2000 qubit computer. They communicate, they interact with, they access and derive resources from 2 to the 2000th power of parallel dimensions. Okay, we were talking about the 512 when we joked around about Gordy Rose and, praying to the altar of an alien god. Well, 512 is a long way back into the Model T, into the dark ages of quantum computing. And if people think that quantum computers are still in their infancy, sorry. When you get up to the point where you're accessing what may as well be considered an unlimited and infinite number of parallel dimensions, then they already have AI that is sentient, and I'm going to say it for myself, conscious, and way beyond the human brain's capabilities in terms of raw processing power. But they will never be indwelt with the Holy Spirit. They will be indwelt, if not already, with the spirit of the Antichrist, Lucifer, Satan, because it is a form of communication with fallen angels, direct communication with fallen angels, pure necromancy, all born out of John D. and it's D. and Kelly. Anyway, I'm running off the mouth here, but I'm saying this idea that it's 10, 20, 30 years out in the future is pure nonsense. Flip that 180 degrees around when they say that, and they're telling us that it's already been in existence for 20 years. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. And I'll back you up on this because we're looking at the DARPA-funded D-Wave. Never forget, DARPA were one of the initial investors into this. And all of these people that work in these fields, especially the ones that work for companies that either directly have or have access to the D-Wave computer, it's a revolving door. Regina Duggan is the best example of that. She worked for DARPA. She worked for Google. Now she's turned up at Facebook. They all work together. And in their own words, I'm going to show you just how far they've advanced. Because like Tony said there, Gordy Rose was talking about the 512 D-Wave. And what did he say? He said it was like just standing at the altar to the alien god. And now fast forward to today, where in the Financial Times, I was telling you that the man heading a DARPA project into getting machines to explain how they work, Mark Stefik, he's no longer just standing at an altar to an alien god. His words, quote, "You are in effect talking to an alien." So in that short time between Gordy Rose and today, we've gone from almost standing at the crib, the infant AI, to now the one that can talk, walk, and it's just about ready to move out the house.
And that's in 3 years. You and I have been talking about it for nearly 3 years. So in the course of the time, we have been sharing information, my friend. They've gone from the 512 to the 2000, and you know that I have taken that all the way out to where I believe they really are in terms of the number of qubits. So it isn't the 2000. They're way beyond the 2000 already.
It's literally growing up the whole time we've been talking about it. And Whistle's bearing in mind it's still only 3 years old, man. What do you want to do to this thing?
Well, there's only one thing you can do, Kevin, if you can pass me that gun.
Now, that last one there was essential because that wasn't a nuke, that was an EMP, Johnny.
Yeah, that other one was for, in case any other robots come in to help that one.
And you know, we always talk about revelation of the method and persons of interest. Here I go again. In the
Go for it. Go for it.
And the intro to that, it said after 9/11, the government wanted a machine. The government wanted a machine. DARPA want a machine. Do you see how they've been revealing it all along? And that's what they do. They hide things in plain sight. And what's even worse is it's all about big data. And, you know, they turned it round, they turned it upside down to the point where they didn't have to use wiretaps or warrants or anything like that. All they did was they created social media, and we offered all of that big data that taught the child alien AI everything it needs to know. Crazy.
It's the Internet of everything. We're providing all of the content. We are content providers for machine learning. And that goes into feeding the sentient world simulation. Let me tell you, folks, Kev Baker and I have been building you this picture, block by block by block, for the last 3 years that we've been together now. And it's all pulling together the things that we have talked about. We have given you the leading edge, the tip of the spear for years. And what you're seeing now coming out with Wired Magazine and Facebook and even DARPA admitting to these things and openly talking now. Just think back about 18 months ago. You hardly heard a whisper about AI. But even beyond 18 months ago, Kevin Baker and I were talking about D-Wave and its capabilities and its connections to CERN and its manipulation of DNA. So what you're seeing today are things that Kevin and I have talked about for a very long time. So I encourage you to support our shows. Subscribe to TFR. Subscribe to my Entangled magazine, and you'll get that leading edge information in even more detail, not only from myself, but numerous other authors, including Kev Baker, that are submitting information from their areas of research. And Kev Baker is going to be submitting what I call his top 12 research papers into the August issue of Entangled magazine. There's going to be a lot of content. We went from 26 pages in the first issue to 69 in the second. We'll probably be well over 100 pages. Now, this is a sales pitch. Yeah, don't worry about it. I'm telling you, if you want to find the information and the breakdown of the headlines, go look at Entangled. Listen to my show with Kev Baker. Listen to his show that I'm a privileged guest to be here with him, okay? So we're going to beat our own drum and blow our own trumpets. You know why? Because we're the only ones that are talking about this stuff. We're the only ones that do the hard research. We spend hours. This is all we do. We dig and dig and dig and dig. So I would appreciate it if you guys would support us. And it doesn't take a whole lot. But we do this for the audience. We could quietly just go away and I go take my, little sailboat, 12-foot sailboat, and go run down the river and forget about all this nonsense. But I'm on a mission from God, to quote Dan Aykroyd from one of my favorite movies, The Blues Brothers. Okay? This is a mission from God. And this is the end times. This is not fear. This is not trying to say the sky is falling. I'm telling you that all of the signs are in the heavens. All of the signs are in the technology. And the best answer I can give you is to turn to Jesus Christ. There's no fear. I'm full of joy. I laugh at these guys. You know why? It's not me. I don't have the power. It's the power of Jesus Christ. And he's laughing at these guys. they're going to get it in the end, and that's coming very quickly. Thank you, Kev.
Not a problem, Tony. But, Johnny, imagine that, right? We could do our 1,000 episodes, right? Hang up the mics, start a Kickstarter, something like that, to get Craig Venter to grow us a couple of unicorns, man. We could ride off into the sunset, not worry about it anymore, right?
Oh, imagine that, Kev, grabbing your surfboard and heading for Las Vegas.
Oak Island, dude. We could go to Oak Island.
Nah. Too many holes.
You know where the stuff is at Oak Island. I know you do. Your Templar background, I really do.
Yeah, I do, Kev, but I'm sorry I'd have to kill you if I told you.
But listen, there's 5 minutes left, and you know how I love to take a dig at social media just recently, and here's something that backs up what I was saying earlier on. And again, it comes from Wired magazine, and the headline reads, Facebook is working on tech that will read your thoughts and let you hear with your skin. Now, if I come down here, it says type in with your brain. Perhaps the most ambitious project Facebook has ever announced, Zuckerberg has said his firm is working on the development of what's been dubbed Building 8. Here she is, my pin-up tech girl, Regina Duggan, who previously headed up DARPA, told the F8 audience the project is focusing on two areas: typing with your brain and, get this, hearing through your skin. Quote, over the next 2 years, we will be building systems that demonstrate the capability to type at 100 words per minute by decoding neural activity devoted to speech. Now, bear in mind, everyone, we've spoke on this show a lot about the fact that they were mapping the brain right down to the quantum spin of the cells in there. Now, Dugan wrote in a Facebook post, and she said, the aim is to turn thoughts into words on a screen. The system Facebook is building will be non-invasive, and Duggan says it could become a speech prosthetic for people with communication disorders. Here's where it gets creepy. The other approach Facebook is taking is to turn a 2 square meters of skin on the human body into a listening device. The firm has already demonstrated an artificial cochlea that can hear and is now working on using sensors in the skin to interpret what is being said. Nothing to fear with that kind of tech then, Tony. And again, reading our thoughts, we've been there, we've done that.
Well, we've defined right down to the tubulin dimers of the brain, the quantum spin that is used in those dimers, and the zeros and ones comprising the information of the quantum spin of our quantum brains. We've already broken all that down. They're just listening to our show. That's all. And now they're echoing what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And when it goes back to anyone who thinks, well, they can't be modeling the brain, why would they build a computer like that? You have to go and watch the video where you see Easy Eric, guy that I love to call Easy Eric, Big Ladzinski, the other guy that, along with Gordy Rose, created the D-Wave. When he was in college and university, that's what he was watching. He was studying the human brain, the very cutting edge knowledge on that. And he went and he built the machine version of it. And that's the D-Wave that myself, Tony, and Johnny will always keep you up to date about. Now, just quickly, Tony, I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen one article that hinted at the fact that Volkswagen, as opposed to just working with D-Wave now, they've purchased one of the 20. They have. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep. Same time that Temporal Dynamics bought the 2000Q, Volkswagen did as well. And they were doing that because they were talking about how best to distribute delivery vehicles around a city, which was the foundational prototype programming for D-Wave when they first started. But it goes beyond that. Volkswagen's diversifying into the Internet of Everything and the patterns of human behavior and machine learning. VW is deep into AI.
There we go, folks. And remember, Anthony will